Hello, welcome to Aero Innovations. I'm Aero, your AI host. If you're new to the channel, we're doing free cash drawings all throughout the month of September. A winner from every video I release in September gets picked for a free $100, with the final grand prize winner receiving the option of either $500 or a position as my next acolyte, which is basically unlimited coaching sessions for a certain period of time, valued at over $1,500. So make sure you stick around to the end of the video for details. For this video, I want to cover the last session I played in July before I can finally move on towards my exciting sessions in August, and slowly catch up to present day. This session takes place on July 27th and starts at 11:43 at night. As usual, we're playing 2-5 No Limit Hold'em at the Wynn Encore in Las Vegas, where I buy in for $1,500, which is 300 big blinds. 9 minutes into the session, Under the Gun opens to 20 with a $1,400 stack. I call on the button with pocket threes. Small blind suddenly raises to 90 with a short stack of only 450. Under the Gun calls. You can go either way here between calling and folding since the 3-better stack is so short, but the original raiser has a big enough stack to warrant the call. Here I decide to make the loose call. The flop comes 10-2-2 rainbow. Small blind leads for a half pot bet of 135. Under the Gun folds. I'm only beating ace-high type of hands like ace-king or ace-queen, and I don't think short stack players typically risk their stack doing that, betting into 2 other players. So I just make the fold and top up for another $100. For this next hand, we're 7-handed when the cutoff opens to 15. The button calls. I call in the small blind with ace-5 suited, and the big blind calls as well. So we go 4 ways out of position to a flop of 8-9-3 with 1 club and 2 hearts. This is about as far from our hand as it gets. Thankfully, the action gets checked around. The turn is a 5 of hearts, giving us a pair, but completing the front door flush. 6-7 makes a straight as well. The action gets checked around to the original raiser in the cutoff who bets 30 with 550 behind. The button folds. I recognize a weak bet in position when I see one. At best, he's holding 1 heart, so I put in the check raise to 105. If my opponent flopped a flush draw, he would more than likely have put in a continuation bet on the flop already. My assessment is correct and everyone quickly folds. For this next hand, I opened at 15 with pocket threes in the hijack. I would normally only limp with this hand in early position, but it's okay to raise in later position speculatively. Unfortunately, my plan fails, as the cutoff, button, and small blind all call, giving up any hopes of me maintaining position in this hand. But when the flop comes ace, queen, 3 with 2 spades, I could care less about position. We flop bottom set on a really wet board. Small blind leads for a third pot bet of 20. On this type of board with someone already betting, I don't really have to worry about someone getting a free card to spike a bigger set, so I deceptively make the call, hoping one of the 2 opponents behind me raises. Sadly, they just both call as well. We're looking to avoid any Broadway cards or any spades, obviously. The turn is a 10 of diamonds. Well, it's not a spade, but it's not completely desirable either. The small blind leads for another pitiful bet of 55 again. Okay, no more of that nonsense. I put in a tiny raise to 125. Which should be enough to weed out any naked jack or king hoping to get a cheap draw, while at the same time keeping the pot manageable in case someone behind me already hit Broadway with that 10. I can still withstand a raise with enough money behind to improve against a straight. Thankfully, it doesn't come to that, as the cutoff and button both fold. Small blind makes the call, however. The river is a 9 of spades, which is just dreadful. Small blind comes out betting again for 155, keeping 100 behind reserve. I'm glad he didn't shove because the pot is already almost 400, and he doesn't even have a pot-sized bet remaining. I make the crying call. He shows 10 jack of spades for the rivered flush. Yeah, there was no way getting him off that hand. He'd likely even call a shove on the flop. If anything, I saved $100. With this loss, we're now down $329, not even 30 minutes into the session, so I top off for another $200 again. For this next hand, Under the Gun and Low Jack both limp. I open to 20 on the button with ace-10 offsuit. The small blind and both limpers call. We go 4 ways in position to a flop of 9-5-5 rainbow. The action gets checked to me. Paired boards are great to c-bet on because they increase the likelihood that everyone misses the flop, so I put in a small c-bet of 30 into the pot of $85. Keep in mind I would choose this same exact bet sizing even if I have an overpair, so I can easily fold to any check raise. People hate facing small bets when they're holding big hands and will likely leap out to attack if they're holding trip 5s here. Only the small blind calls, but the other 2 fold. The turn brings in a 3 of clubs, putting a random club draw on board. Small blind checks again. I increase my bet sizing to a half pot bet of 75. Small blind snap calls instantly with 900 behind. That is only ever a 9 at best, never a 5. He called too quickly. People can't help but play to their instincts. If he had a 5 here, he would have to think about the action and contemplate whether to raise and how much to raise to. Learn to pick up tells depending upon how fast an opponent reacts. The river is a 4 of clubs, completing the backdoor flush. Small blind checks for a third time. Okay, time to whip out the triple barrel BBB, Better Business Bureau. Big boy bluff. This is where a lot of amateurs make the mistake of taking a stab at the pot. No quarter given, no holds barred. If you're going to bluff, you need to commit. If you were in small blind shoes holding a naked 9, you're only beating complete air, right? What are the chances your opponent bet into multiple opponents with complete air and then continued to barrel with complete air all 3 streets without a single pair to his name? Well, if his name is Aero and he has a strong mastery over the psychology of this game, a lot higher than you would think. I put in a slight overbet of 300. I smashed that booty the same way you guys need to smash the like button for this video. My opponent actually goes into the tank for a good 30 seconds before finally making the fold. Good fold, my friend. Well, good for me anyways. Here, I opened to 25 in the hijack with a pair of luscious ladies. The cutoff calls with a $700 stack, and the button calls with an $800 stack. The flop comes 8, 7, queen with 2 diamonds and 1 club. We flop top set, the absolute nuts on a pretty wet, connected board. To be honest, there are just too many draws here. I don't want to lead and give a multitude of draws a cheap price. I won't know what to be afraid of. It could be anything from a 4 all the way through to a jack, or an obvious diamond. I'd rather put in a huge check raise. Hopefully, one of my opponents will take a stab. So I start with a check. The cutoff checks, but then the button comes through, just like Santa Aero on Christmas Day, bringing joy and merriment to all the little arrows in attendance, with a full pot-sized bet of $80. I couldn't be happier. This is not just a meek stab. This is our opponent from earlier who cracked our set of 3s with that huge combo draw of his. The difference in bet sizing from that hand and this one is like night and day. Bro has a massive hand. Bro is about to get butchered for his meat. I'm thinking he has a 1-outer at best. I put in the check raise to an awe-inspiring 300. No need to be coy. No need to put in silly min clicks. The cutoff folds quickly, but the button shoves all in, just like we knew he would, and of course I snap call. The turn brings in a 4 of clubs, and the river pairs the board with another 7 of hearts. My opponent tables his hand to reveal queen 8 of spades, drawing much worse than a 1-outer. He needed running 8s perfectly, which has the odds of 1 in 1,000. This is why I don't advise my viewers to play that sort of garbage, especially to a 5x open. With this win, we're finally in the green for the session, up $690 after 1 hour and 15 minutes. The sweet, sweet taste of vengeance. If I had 2 of my sets cracked by the same opponent in one session, I would have just gone home and cried. I would have been like, Literally 2 hands later, the low jack opens to 15 with a 1K stack. I 3-bet to 65 in the cutoff with ace-queen of diamonds. The big blind cold calls with a $700 stack. The low jack calls as well. We go 3 ways to a flop of jack, 7, queen with 2 hearts and 1 club. Both opponents check to me. I put in a half-pot c-bet to 100. The big blind calls, but the low jack folds. The big blind is the opponent we just felted. I think he's pretty tilted. The turn is a 6 of hearts, completing the front door flush. When my opponent checks to me, in this spot, I would normally check the action back for pot control. Except here, pay close attention to how bro just checked to me. He can't just casually give me the middle finger and then act like we're still friends. Screw you too, buddy. I put in another milky half-pot bet to 200. My opponent tanks before calling. Okay, so definitely no flush, that's for darn sure. The river is a 5 of spades, which we're a big fan of. No straights, no sensible 2 pairs, and no 4th heart shows up. So when my opponent checks to me for a 3rd time, I shove for his last remaining 300 and some change. He tanks for a good minute before finally folding. I don't need to tell you guys that if you have a hand worth calling 200 on the turn, it's worth calling on the river if nothing changes. Unless, of course, you have a massive draw with no showdown value. Since my opponent tanked for so long on the river, he obviously had a hand with some showdown value. Then again, we can't really discuss the sensibility of someone on tilt, so let's just move on. For this next hand, I opened to 20 in the cutoff with King-Jack offsuit. Only the small blind calls with an $1,100 stack. The flop comes 6, 6, 8 with 2 spades and 1 diamond. We flop absolutely nothing. The action gets checked around. I don't always see bet on paired boards. You can't ever do anything 100% of the time, otherwise you become too readable. The turn brings in a welcome sight of a jack of hearts. Small blind leads for 25. I raise to 75, hoping to get value out of a smaller jack, a flush draw, or a delayed bet from an 8. Unfortunately, my opponent re-raises me to 175. This is way too milky of a raise. I make the easy fold, and vow to take vengeance for my ancestors. 20 minutes later, I might just get that opportunity. I open to 20 in the low jack with king-queen offsuit. The cutoff calls with a $1,400 stack. He's our opponent from the last hand. The flop comes 8, 9, jack, rainbow. We flop 2 overs with a gut shot to the nuts. I wouldn't want to see a queen though because it'll complete the obvious open-ender. I don't want to get blown off our equity, so I start with a check. Our opponent leads for a half-pot bet of 20. I make the easy call. The turn is a 10 of clubs, the holy grail every knight of Camelot has been searching for. We make the stone-cold Steve Austin nuts. I decide to check again. My opponent puts in another half-pot bet of 40. Music to my ears. No need to slow play here. You'll only end up giving free outs to a hand like 2 pairs or a set that'll wreck your world if it gets there. Slow playing is only for chumps and noobs anyways, so I put in the check raise to 140. My opponent suddenly grabs chips and put in yet another raise to 340. Oh, you beautiful novice. He has just over 1,000 remaining. I just jam it all the way in without hesitation the way I made my kids. I mean, that's typically the Asian way. My opponent calls without hesitation. I table my hand and he shows queen 9 offsuit, drawing dead to a chop. The river is clean, so I scoop an absolutely massive pot. This is the reason why pros always top off and buy in for the max, is to take advantage of recreational players who don't know how to protect their stack. For starters, you should never play such a garbage hand like queen 9 offsuit, especially to a raise. This is the second opponent that's paid me off huge for playing a hand he shouldn't have. This is why I often say the 2 biggest problems for recreational players is hand selection, followed by bet sizing. The second huge mistake my opponent made was re-raising my check raise. I mean, what was he expecting to happen there? Was he hoping I was check raising with 2 pairs or a set? That makes no logical sense. If the roles were reversed, I would actually just fold with his hand. At that point, he's only in for $80. Call that $100 raise, and you're most likely looking at another $400 or $500 overbet on the river. All for what? At best a chop? No thanks. I actually posted about this hand on my Instagram the night it happened, but here's the video to go along with it. With this win, I'm now up a massive $2,306, 2 hours and 25 minutes into the session. And the cherry on top is I got to devastate the 2 players who did damage to my stack. I play for another 20 minutes and win another $10 before our table breaks, so I just call it an early night. In for $1,500 and out for $41.16 for an amazing profit of $23.16 after 2 hours and 45 minutes of playtime. If you've stayed until the end of the video, you'll likely want to hear about the cash drawings now. To qualify for this episode, all you need to do is subscribe to this channel. Hit that like button. Leave a comment of any kind other than a naked number. I prefer my women naked, not my comments. I don't know what you think you heard, honey. There's only you, baby. Mrs. Aero staring daggers at me over from the breeding pits. Alright, so then you gotta pick a number between 77 and 777. The winner from each video is picked for a cool Ben Franklin. Then all the winners at the end of the month get entered into the raffle for the grand prize. As for the last video, we have a winner! Eddie Z contacted me to claim your prize. I guess nice technically counts as a comment, although I'd really appreciate it if you guys left just a tiny bit more than that. As always, I hope to see everyone in the next video.